This is your board game shortcut to Scythe, the Wind Gambit and Invaders from Afar. As casually hinted before, in this video I'll show you how to integrate these two expansions into the base game. If you need help with the base game itself, check out the video linked up here or in the description below. There you'll find a concise how to play video for Scythe. I'll introduce both expansions individually and explain how to incorporate them into your future games. After that, I'll show you our custom mod that turns this cozy game for two into a full-blown strategic showdown. By the way, I painted the minis myself, so they are no longer in their original state. Let's start with the Wind Gambit, which introduces two new modules: airships and new endgame conditions. You can incorporate these modules individually or use both together in your games. To set up the airships, each player takes their faction's airship and places it on their home territory. There are airship tiles with red and green sides. The red tiles are offensive while the green ones are passive. Separate the tiles by color, shuffle both stacks and reveal one tile from each. These will determine the abilities of all airships for this game. You move airships just like other units during the move action. However, airships have greater range determined by the green passive airship tile. Airships allow much freer and faster movement across the board. Rivers, lakes and enemy territories pose no obstacles. You can even share a region peacefully with enemy airships. The only restricted areas are home bases. An exception to this is the offensive tile Blitzkrieg. Thematically, it's clear that airships cannot use tunnels or trigger traps. Traps will be explained later in the Invaders from Afar section. When playing a factory card, which allows you to perform an additional move at the end of your turn, you can also move your airship by its range +1. Leaders, mechs, workers and structures can control territories. Airships cannot. This is important when counting your controlled territories at the end of the game. In-game, this means that if your airship hovers over a territory you don't control, you can't access resources left there by you or another player. Similarly, you can't steal resources from opponents. So what are airships good for then? The primary purpose of airships is to transport workers or resources. The red offensive airship tile indicates what and how much you can transport. For example, it might be 3 resources in one game or 2 workers in another. A big advantage of transporting workers is that you can move them across rivers earlier to regions where you want to produce resources, without waiting for a river crossing mech. According to the rules, airships are neither mechs nor leaders, so they don't benefit from mech abilities that have been unlocked. Picking up workers or resources works the same way as with mechs. The difference is that you load only the permitted type, either workers or resources, based on the offensive airship tile. Workers cannot carry resources onto the airship. It's always either or, depending on the airship tile. While resources are on the airship, they remain yours. You can spend them and they count as your resources at the end of the game. You can drop them off anywhere, but if the territory isn't under your control, you lose ownership of the resources. You can only pick them up if the territory beneath your airship is under your control. When transporting workers, note that even though they are technically on a region, they don't control it because they are on the airship. This is crucial for actions requiring workers on a territory, such as producing, trading, building or deploying mechs. Workers on the airship cannot perform these actions. You can drop workers off on any region they could normally move to, including regions with only an enemy structure, provided it isn't guarded by enemy mechs, leaders or workers. Airships do not influence combat. Since they can freely hover over enemy territories, they can't initiate combat. This also means you can't play additional combat cards for them. If you want to spice up your game further, you can give each player unique airship abilities. Each player would draw 1 red and 1 green airship tile. That wraps up airships. Let's move on to the endgame conditions module. This replaces the standard endgame condition of placing your 6th star on the triumph track. Either draw a random endgame condition tile or agree on one as a group and place it next to the triumph track. The track itself remains active for achieving objectives and placing stars. However, the game no longer ends automatically with the 6th star. Instead, it ends when the endgame conditions is fulfilled. The Invaders from Afar expansion introduces 2 additional factions to the game, allowing Scythe to be played with up to 7 players. Treat these factions and their components like the original factions during setup. This means the new player mats aren't exclusively tied to the new factions. What sets the new factions Togawa and Albion apart is that both have faction markers tied to unique abilities, which I'll explain shortly. Before diving into the new factions, note that if you're playing with 6 or 7 players, 2 abilities from the original factions should be adjusted, as they'd otherwise be relatively weak or ineffective. For Crimea, the mech ability Wayfare is replaced with the ability to move to any unoccupied village. Polania's faction ability Meander is replaced with a new tile that keeps the ability that allows you to choose 2 options from encounter cards instead of 1. Additionally, at the end of the game, Polania earns 3 coins for every region it controls with an encounter token symbol. That's all you need to keep in mind during setup. Let's take a closer look at the 2 new factions. I'll skip most of the mech abilities since, like in a base game, they are self-explanatory. Clan Albion has a unique ability that allows its leader to place flag markers on the board. After moving your leader or winning a battle with him, you may take a flag marker from your supply and place it in your leader's current region, provided no flag is already there. Once placed, flags cannot be moved or removed. While they don't control territories on their own, they offer strategic movement advantages and contribute to endgame scoring. The Rally mech ability lets Albion mechs and leaders jump to regions containing a worker or flag marker. If you distribute your markers strategically early on, you can move your leader and mechs swiftly across the board and launch unexpected attacks. During the endgame scoring, each flag marker in a controlled region counts as an additional territory, except for the 2 regions adjacent to your home base. The other new faction is the Togawa Shogunate. Instead of flags, the Togawa leader can place traps at the end of her movement or after a battle. These can even be placed in regions containing enemy structures. A trap is placed face down, arming it in the region where the leader currently stands. When an opponent's unit, leader, mech or worker enters the region, the trap is triggered. Flip the token to reveal a penalty for trespassing player, such as losing popularity, power, coins or combat cards. Similar to Albion flags, Togawa traps also aid movement via the Shinobi mech ability. Mechs and leaders can jump to regions with trap markers. Additionally, a disarmed trap can be rearmed. Traps that are armed or are rearmed at the end of the game count as controlled territories. However, if an opponent's structure occupies the same region, the territory counts for the opponent instead. When playing with both new factions, remember that only 1 faction marker, flag or trap, is allowed per region. If you're only 2 players and want to spice up your game a bit, I have something for you. Early on, we played Scythe extensively with just 2 players and eventually realized it felt too peaceful. Practically a cozy game in a war zone. So we thought about how to make games with 2 or perhaps even 3 players more exciting. The first trick is creating the number 1 reason for war: limited land and resources. After choosing your factions, halve the board by using unused game components to mark off restricted areas that cannot be entered. Make sure not to block off territories needed for river crossing. If you also incorporate the next part, leave all land regions around the factory accessible for play. What really makes this mod shine is the following tweak. After completing the usual setup, take 2 mechs, 2 recruits, 2 structures, 4 upgrade cubes and 3 stars from your faction and player mats. Each player decides individually which ones to remove, though you could let your opponent choose instead, making things even more cutthroat. The only rule is that you cannot remove the mech granting the river crossing ability. Of course, you can agree to adjust the type or number of removed markers, but it must be the same for both players. The empty spaces on your mats don't become available right away. Instead, they are filled with markers from an unused faction, ideally in a color distinct from your own. This means these mechs, structures, etc. are initially blocked and unavailable to you, even if you had the resources to unlock them. You'll need to earn them first. Take the 13 markers you've removed from your mats and divide them into 3 piles, each containing a mix of different markers. Next, either you or your opponent, depending on how challenging you want it to be, places the 3 piles in the 3 land regions surrounding the factory. Since the mechs and structures could be mistaken as active components, lay them down to signal that they are not yet active. These markers around the factory represent blocked abilities and effects. You'll need to claim them with your leader or a mech and perhaps even fight for them. Once your combat unit occupies a region, you can retrieve your pile of markers. Only then you can unlock and purchase the corresponding upgrades, structures, mechs, recruits, etc. Now your combat units are occupying a region that also contains your opponent's markers. Will you play nice and leave quickly, or will you stay and block access to your opponent's pile? As you can imagine, this prevents players from meandering peacefully across a large board, waving from a distance without significant interaction. Previously, the factory and encounter markers were the only reasons to approach your opponent, and even then not always urgently. Now there's a real sense of urgency, and being the first to arrive gives you a significant advantage. So far, none of our games have ended with someone permanently blocking the opponent's pile. But how about adding a penalty? For every blocked marker left on the board at the end of the game, deduct 5 coins from the player's final score. To ramp up the challenge even further, remove the first 2 workers from your mat during setup. This means you'll face production costs right from the start, which will escalate quickly if you don't free your workers as soon as possible. If you try out this mod, let me know how it plays after a few games, whether you see room for improvement or if you have additional ideas. I hope this guide to the expansions and my mod has brought a fresh spark to your Scythe experience. Scythe remains one of my top 5 favorite games and is one of the most played big games in my collection. It's also a hit with people who've never really been into board games before. As I mentioned, I'd especially love to hear your thoughts on the mod and your experiences with it if you give it a try. Many of my previous videos are still waiting to be translated into English, so if you'd like to see more, let me know by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If you're looking for another strategy game that's perfect for 2 players, you might enjoy my guide to Ironwood. You can find it right here. Thank you for watching and see you next time.